That tingling in your hands or your feet right now, most people assume it's just poor circulation, or they blame it on sleeping in the wrong position. But I need you to stop and really listen to what I'm about to tell you, because in my years working with patients over 60, I have seen that sensation, that exact feeling, be the very first warning sign of something far more serious. Something that, if ignored, can take away your ability to walk, your ability to sleep, your ability to live independently. And the tragedy is that most people only find out what it really means when it's already progressed far beyond where it needed to go. If you're over 60 and you've been feeling tingling or numbness in your hands or feet, even occasionally, this video is one of the most important things you'll watch this year. Not because I want to frighten you, but because what I'm going to share with you today is information that most people in your situation never receive. And that gap in information has real consequences. So stay with me, because what I'm about to explain changes everything. I've had patients come to me describing exactly what you might be feeling right now. A tingling that starts in the toes. Maybe it spreads to the soles of the feet. Sometimes it moves up the legs, or it appears in the fingertips. Some describe it as a buzzing sensation, like their feet fell asleep and never fully woke up. Others tell me it feels like walking on sand, or like there's always a slight numbness between the skin and the world. And then there are the ones who wake up at 3 in the morning with a burning so intense in the soles of their feet that they have to get up, walk around, press their feet against the cold floor just to get some relief. These are not imaginary symptoms. These are not normal for your age. That phrase, and I say this with real frustration, has done enormous damage to the health of millions of people over 60. In my years working with patients over 60, I've seen this pattern over and over. Someone notices a tingling. They mention it to their doctor. The doctor runs a basic test, finds nothing alarming, and says something like, "It's probably just circulation," or "That's to be expected at your age." And the patient, trusting, reasonable, accepts that. Goes home, tries to live with it, and month by month, quietly, the symptoms get worse. The tingling becomes more constant. Then the numbness starts, not just occasional, persistent. Then comes the burning at night. Then the sharp electric jolts that shoot through the foot without warning. Then the balance problems. And by that point, the person is holding onto walls to walk down their own hallway. They've stopped going out socially because they're afraid of falling. They've given up activities they loved, gardening, dancing, long walks, because the fear of losing their footing is too great. And all of it traces back to that first tingling that someone told them was normal. This is not normal. This is your nervous system sending you a distress signal. And if you don't understand what that signal means, and more importantly, what's causing it, the progression doesn't stop on its own. What I want you to understand is what is actually happening inside your body when you feel those sensations. Because once you understand the mechanism, everything else I tell you today will make complete sense. Think of your peripheral nerves. The nerves in your hands, your feet, your legs, as electrical cables running throughout your body. These cables carry signals back and forth between your brain and every part of your body. And just like an electrical cable, each nerve fiber has a protective coating around it. That coating is called myelin. When that myelin sheath degrades, when the protective coating around your nerve fibers starts to break down, the electrical signals those nerves carry become distorted. Sometimes they fire when they shouldn't. Sometimes they fail to fire when they should. And the result is exactly what you might be experiencing. Tingling, burning, numbness, electric shocks, loss of sensation, loss of coordination. And here's what makes this even more serious. And I'll come back to this in just a moment. Most of the damage happens long before the symptoms become severe enough to get anyone's attention. The nerves are deteriorating silently, and the window for meaningful support is closing. This is what researchers call peripheral neuropathy. It affects approximately 20 million Americans, the overwhelming majority of them over the age of 60. 60 to 70% of people with diabetes develop some degree of it. But what most people don't realize is that you don't need a formal diabetes diagnosis for this process to be happening in your body. Prediabetes, borderline blood sugar, chronic inflammation, any of these can initiate the same cascade of nerve damage. Now, what causes the myelin to degrade? This is where the research gets really important and really underreported. The first and most significant factor is a deficiency in vitamin B12. Not a mild deficiency, a severe, chronic, progressive deficiency that is extraordinarily common in adults over 60 and almost never tested for at the level of specificity it requires. Studies suggest that up to 40% of adults over 60 have B12 levels low enough to impair nerve function. Let me say that again, up to 40%, nearly half of the population in your age group. And the reason is physiological. After 60, the stomach's ability to absorb B12 from food drops dramatically. There is a protein called intrinsic factor, produced by the stomach lining, that is essential for B12 absorption. As we age, intrinsic factor production declines. So even if you're eating well, even if you're taking a standard B12 supplement, your body may not be absorbing nearly enough to maintain the myelin sheath around your peripheral nerves. And if you are taking metformin for blood sugar management, as millions of people over 60 are, the situation becomes considerably more serious. Clinical evidence points to metformin blocking B12 absorption through a separate mechanism, reducing circulating B12 levels in long-term users by up to 30%. This means that a very large number of people managing diabetes or prediabetes are taking a medication that is simultaneously depleting the one nutrient their nerves most depend on, and almost no one is telling them this. But B12 deficiency is only part of the picture. Because the nerves aren't just suffering from a lack of nutritional support, they are also under sustained attack from oxidative stress. Over decades, free radicals accumulate in nerve tissue, damaging the cells, impairing their mitochondria, disrupting the energy production that nerve cells need to maintain themselves and repair. And then there is inflammation, chronic, systemic, low-grade inflammation that most people over 60 are carrying without knowing it. Inflammation that quietly damages the small blood vessels that supply oxygen and nutrients to the peripheral nerves. When those blood vessels are compromised, even by slightly elevated blood sugar, even pre-diabetic levels, the nerves begin to starve. The supply chain that keeps them healthy and functional is cut off slowly over years. The signal comes through distorted. You feel it as tingling, as burning, as numbness, as pain. This is not a mystery. This is a mechanism, and a mechanism can be addressed. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Margaret. She was 69 years old when she first came to see me. She had been dealing with burning and tingling in her feet for nearly 3 years. She had seen her primary care physician, a neurologist, and a podiatrist. She had been prescribed gabapentin, which made her so foggy and unsteady that she stopped taking it after 6 weeks. She had tried several B12 supplements from the pharmacy with no noticeable effect. She was sleeping with a fan blowing cold air on her feet just to reduce the burning enough to fall asleep. She told me very quietly that she had started to feel afraid in her own home, afraid of the hallway at night, afraid of the stairs. Her daughter had started calling every morning to make sure she hadn't fallen. And Margaret told me, I remember this clearly, I feel like I'm disappearing. When I reviewed her situation, the pattern was immediately recognizable. Her B12 levels were low, not critically, but in the range that conventional medicine often considers acceptable. And yet research increasingly links to neurological impairment. She had been taking a standard cyanocobalamin supplement, the synthetic, cheaper form of B12 found in most over-the-counter vitamins, that research suggests penetrates nerve tissue far less effectively than the methylated form. Her oxidative stress markers were elevated. We made targeted changes, and within weeks, she told me the burning at night had reduced noticeably. Within a few months, she was sleeping through the night again. She told her daughter she felt like herself again. Margaret's story is not unusual. I have seen this pattern hundreds of times, and that is what makes it so frustrating, because what she experienced for 3 years was not inevitable. None of it was inevitable. This is one of the most important things I can share with you today. Think about what the progressive worsening of these symptoms really means in the context of your daily life. It is not just the burning at night, though the sleep deprivation from that alone is devastating. Chronic sleep disruption from nerve pain reshapes everything. Your mood, your cognitive sharpness, your immune function, your emotional resilience. It is the loss of confidence in your own body. The moment you start questioning whether you can trust your feet to carry you. The moment you stop going to places you love because you are calculating the risk of every uneven surface, every crowded room, every unfamiliar floor. I've watched patients who love to dance stop going to any social event involving music. I've watched gardeners give up their gardens because kneeling and rising had become genuinely dangerous. I've watched grandparents who used to chase their grandchildren around the yard start sitting on the sidelines, not because they chose to, but because their nervous system was failing them in a way that nobody had adequately explained or addressed. And underneath all of it is a fear that most people in this situation carry but rarely say out loud: the fear of becoming dependent. The fear that the day is coming when they will need someone else to help them with things they have always done themselves. That fear is real, and it is not irrational. Falls in adults over 65 are the leading cause of accidental death in that age group. And neuropathy, the loss of sensation, balance, and coordination it causes, is the #1 contributing risk factor. This is serious, not to frighten you, but because you deserve to know exactly what is at stake. If what I'm sharing today is new to you, and I suspect it is, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I release critical health information for people over 60 every week. Information your doctor may not have time to share in a routine appointment. Hit the subscribe button below. It costs nothing, and it could be one of the most important health decisions you make today. Now, what the research increasingly suggests is that the peripheral nervous system has a remarkable capacity to begin recovering. When given the specific nutritional support it has been lacking, not masking the symptoms with medication that simply turns down the volume on the pain signal while the underlying damage continues. Actual support for the biological processes of nerve maintenance and repair. And there are specific compounds that clinical research has identified as critical for this process. The first is methylcobalamin, the methylated form of vitamin B12. This distinction matters enormously, and it is one of the most overlooked details in this entire area of health. Standard B12 supplements, the ones you find in most pharmacies, use cyanocobalamin, the synthetic, inexpensive form. The body must convert it before it can be used in nerve tissue. And in many people over 60, that conversion is impaired. Methylcobalamin is already in the bioactive form. It crosses directly into nerve tissue in ways that standard B12 simply cannot. Researchers have studied it extensively for its role in myelin synthesis and nerve regeneration, the actual rebuilding of the protective coating around nerve fibers. This is not a minor difference. It is the difference between a supplement that reaches your nerve tissue and one that largely doesn't. And this is almost certainly why so many people in your situation have tried B12 and seen no result. They were taking the wrong form. The second compound is alpha-lipoic acid. What makes it uniquely important, and what most people, including many in the medical community, don't appreciate, is that it works specifically inside nerve cells. It is one of the only antioxidants capable of neutralizing oxidative damage within the mitochondria of nerve cells themselves. Standard antioxidants, vitamins C and E, don't penetrate nerve tissue effectively. Alpha-lipoic acid does. It is one of the most researched natural compounds for peripheral nerve support in the published literature. And researchers studying peripheral nerve disorders have observed it can meaningfully reduce the oxidative stress that accumulates in nerve tissue over decades. Patients who add this compound often report that the intensity of the burning and tingling begins to change, not overnight, but progressively over weeks and months of consistent use. The third is acetyl L-carnitine. Nerve cells are among the most energy-intensive cells in the human body. They require constant, robust mitochondrial function to maintain themselves, transmit signals, and, critically, repair. Acetyl L-carnitine supports the transport of fatty acids into the mitochondria of nerve cells, providing the fuel those cells need for the repair process. It has been studied extensively in clinical settings for nerve health support and is considered by many researchers in this field to be a foundational compound for peripheral nerve recovery. Beyond these three, the research points to benfotiamine, the fat-soluble form of vitamin B1, as particularly important for anyone whose nerve damage may be related to elevated blood sugar. Standard thiamine does not penetrate nerve tissue efficiently. Benfotiamine does. It has been studied specifically for its role in protecting peripheral nerves from glucose-related damage. Magnesium rounds out this picture, a mineral involved in over 300 biological processes, including the regulation of nerve signals and the control of nerve cell excitability. Most people over 60 are chronically deficient, and that deficiency directly contributes to the hyperexcitability of nerve tissue that makes symptoms like burning and electric jolts worse. And vitamin D3, what researchers are now recognizing, plays a direct role in nerve health, with deficiency linked in emerging research to increased nerve sensitivity and pain. The majority of people over 60 are significantly deficient, particularly during winter months. Now, finding each of these compounds separately, in the right forms, the right doses, and the right combinations, is not easy. And most people over 60 don't have the time or the knowledge to put this together on their own. That's why I've left a link in the description to a formula that brings all of this together. I've reviewed it carefully, and it's one of the few options I feel comfortable recommending to my patients. The link in the description below takes you directly to the natural nerve support formula I recommend to my patients. It combines everything I've covered today in the specific forms that actually reach nerve tissue. Take a look when you have a moment. I think it will make a lot of sense after what you just learned. You might be wondering, if all of this is supported by research, why hasn't your doctor told you about it? I want to address that honestly. This is not a conspiracy, but it is a system problem. The conventional medical model is built around diagnosis and pharmaceutical intervention. A 10-minute appointment is barely enough time to review symptoms and prescribe a medication. There is no time to discuss nutritional deficiencies, oxidative stress, or the specific forms of B12 that penetrate nerve tissue. The system was not designed for that conversation, and so gabapentin gets prescribed, Lyrica gets prescribed, medications that, in many cases, create enough sedation that patients report less pain, while the underlying nerve damage continues and the side effects of cognitive fog, unsteadiness, and dependency accumulate. The result is that millions of people over 60 are suffering unnecessarily. Not because the answers don't exist, but because the structure of conventional medicine makes those answers very difficult to reach. You are not powerless here. That tingling in your hands or your feet that brought you to this video today, now you understand what it is actually telling you. It is not a normal part of aging. It is your peripheral nervous system asking for support it has not been receiving. And now you know specifically what that support looks like. Your body has a remarkable capacity to respond when given what it genuinely needs. I have watched patients who had given up on ever feeling normal again begin to reclaim their sleep, their confidence, their independence. It does not happen overnight, but it happens. And now you know something that most people your age will never learn. If today's video opened your eyes to something important, share it with someone you care about, because there are millions of people over 60 dealing with this silently. And they don't have to. The link in the description goes directly to the natural formula I recommend. Take a look when you have a quiet moment. Subscribe for more critical health information every week, and leave a comment below. What was the most surprising thing you learned today? I read every single one.